Ron, Michelle, Brent, and that's 4, and it's a 7-member committee. Cody, I'm prepared for you to take the meeting live on YouTube if you can, and we can pause and wait.
All right, Brent, we are live.
So this is Brent Schoenemeyer. I'm co-chair of the building committee. It's September 16th, 2021. I'm going to call the meeting to order. You have an agenda in front of you. If somebody wants to make a motion, that would be appreciated.
So moved.
A motion, a second.
It's John Laney. I'll second.
Okay.
And John's on.
John's on. Okay, second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Roll call. We have 5 of the 7 members of the committee present. I'm mindful of the fact that John needs to leave by 9:30 and Michelle needs to leave by 10:30, and Michael will be joining us at some point. That being the case, this is a really important meeting of the building committee, partly because we need to figure out whether we want to advance some ideas to the full board. At some point, the decisions we make today aren't determinative. We need the full board approval to act on them, but if we're not so inclined, the full board won't have these issues in front of them. There's the minutes from June 24th, 2021. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve?
So moved.
Joycelyn, second. I heard Laney make a second.
John's.
I'll second, whatever.
And Michelle.
John's mouth was moving, but his microphone wasn't on.
Okay, all right. So all those in favor of approval of the June 24th minutes, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
And I seem to be rushing people. I should have given you a chance to read the minutes. If for some reason you discover something in the minutes, which is other than what we talked about, we're happy to go back and, amend or reconsider them. I just wanted to get to the really significant action item of business. I want to remind everybody we're in open session. We're on YouTube. We're discussing an acquisition of a property with another public entity, which happens to be the city of Green Valley. And we had a really great conversation about this. This is our last building committee meeting. And we gave our staff some pretty clear and explicit instructions, excuse me, with the hope that they would come back with a favorable report. And I'm going to turn it over to Steve Potter.
Okay, thanks, Brent, and thanks to everyone. And hopefully you've had an opportunity to take a look at the document that I sent you. I sent this individually to you earlier this week. It's a document titled "Offer to Purchase Vacant Unimproved Land," also in board docs, and also everywhere else where you would expect to find it. And so, this document, "Offer to Purchase Vacant Unimproved Land," is what I drafted following the last building committee meeting. And I incorporated all of the recommendations from the committee, and then we shared it with the city. If I can draw your attention to a handful of points on the document, one of the things that is different that's on here is paragraph 5. And it's one of the reasons why I'm bringing this back to you, because I was only authorized to negotiate a purchase price up to $300,000. The city has come back with a purchase price of $320,000. If you remember from the conversation that we had at the last meeting, I think that we were talking about potentially, up to $400,000 down. Just to kind of allow the negotiations. In terms of budget, we have significantly more than this budgeted for land acquisition. So it is within our budget. There is probably the next important thing to go to is paragraph 9. And paragraph 9 is where we put all the different conditions that we wanted involving the property acquisition. It says that there will be no additional property construction between us and the creek. That was really the 100-year flood line. That was an important provision that the city installs the water line at their cost and coordinates with us as part of that. that if we decide, we're not obligated, but if we decide to connect to the city sanitary sewer to the north, then the city is responsible for putting in the sleeves and installing everything that they need to in order for us to connect to the north. We could still connect to the west and the south if we choose to go that direction. But this is actually a shorter direction, but it's under a creek, but all of the risk, if you will, and added expense to going under the creek is being shouldered by the city. In addition, we did put in here that if the city decided for some reason that they wanted to use our connection to connect other properties further south of us, that they had the right to turn that into a public sewer, that we would yield it to them. They had the right to turn it into a public sewer, and all updates and upgrades would be on them. Let's see. Two things that they wanted to make sure that we put in the letter of intent, which we intended to do all of this, but the last two bullets on paragraph 9 were demands of the city. And so one of them is it spells out that we understand that we are going to have to widen Buckner-Tarsney Road at our expense to put in the turn lane and to do all the things that we knew that we were going to have to do. That was always part of our calculations for land preparation. The other bullet is talks about easements and right-of-ways that we need to do in terms of the sewers. And so again, this was something that we knew we needed to do. They asked us to actually put this in. One last thing to highlight is that we're working pretty quickly on this because the city is ready to go now. We are ready to go. We're not being challenged by third parties that are trying to also buy the piece of property. It's really very much sort of a one-on-one transaction where nothing was, it's not like a piece of property that was on the market and that we're working with lots of other folks for or against, if I would. We have a pretty quick timeline. We're expecting to close on this in November to have ownership of the property by November. In paragraph 11, it does state that basically the letter of intent stays in place until September 24th. That's right after their next Board of Aldermen meeting. There would be no problem, I don't think, if we wanted to push this out just a little bit so that we make the letter of intent expire on September 30th or, October 10th or something like that. If just in case, in case something comes up, an emergency issue comes up at the Board of Aldermen, they can't address this and then they need to address it the next week. So we could, if we needed to do that. But based on the conversations I've had with Ken Murphy, conversations Jake's had with Ken Murphy, this timeline, even though it's as tight as it is very doable and they'll be able to execute. So this is the staff report on the letter of intent. Obviously, we are very much in favor of this. We feel like they responded positively to everything that we asked for. They asked for a little bit more compensation, but that compensation is in line with the market. If you remember, because we kind of looked at the square footage of all the neighboring properties last time. And so staff recommends that the committee recommend this to the full board for adoption.
Thank you, Steve. Ken Murphy is the city administrator.
Yes.
City administrator.
Thank you. Sorry.
In case somebody was wondering who Ken Murphy was, and so he would be Steve's counterpart. Congratulations to the staff about getting it in front of them and getting our considerations incorporated into agreement. Any discussion? Any comments?
Well, yes, John Laney, if you may, you may recall that I had some significant concerns about this proposal as it was originally presented. I have had the opportunity to, and I appreciate that opportunity to read carefully through this material and feel that the concerns that I had previously have been addressed appropriately. And so I would like to move approval, if I may.
Okay, there's a motion to approve the agreement. Is there a second? And then we get to the discussion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second?
I just had a question, which I'm sure I know the answers for, but we have confirmation that it's not like a wetland, or we've done a phase one test and all that kind of check?
We haven't done a full phase one on this exact acreage, but there's been a full phase one on the site itself.
Perfect, yeah.
It's outside the 100-year floodplain. There are wetlands that are nearby, but we're not within that area. And we have done some test borings already on the site. Our architects have, and so we are feeling very confident about where it is.
I kind of suspected the answer, but just curious. And I thought it was interesting, that trail that
Yes.
is going to be like packed gravel or blacktop, or do we kind of know what the city is thinking about?
Probably sidewalk. It's probably
Even better.
Yeah, it's sidewalk that runs in front of our property along Buckner Tarsney. And then on the other side of the creek, if you continue north is up on the image that you're looking at, or where Exhibit A, where the words Exhibit A are. If you continue north across the creek that's there, it actually hooks into the city trail system, which that is the packed rock system. And that just goes all over the city of Green Valley. So, I mean, this is it's actually very, very nice. That connects the high school to this property.
And I'm thinking too that it's a bad word to use, but advertising, you've got a trail, just more.
Yes.
You're not driving by at 30 miles an hour, this physically there and seeing it.
It's very similar to, it's not a perfect analogy, but it's similar to what's happened at Woodneath. So we've got our trail on Woodneath, but then there's the city trail that hooks up to Woodneath, and so, yeah.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
I appreciate that they have addressed our issues adequately in this, so I feel confident about this as well. I agree with Laney.
This is Brent Schoenemeyer. I think I'd like to change paragraph number 11 to a later date, just so that we don't get tripped up by something that might happen. And I just glanced at a calendar. I thought maybe Friday, October 14th would be sufficient time to.
So you'd like to amend
Paragraph number 11.
to say that, and that would probably be done as a friendly amendment, or
I hope it would be
the
friendly.
movers and the seconders okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
I just didn't want the 24th to go by and then the agreement is void and then we're having to regroup. Okay. Any other discussion on this acquisition? Just a point of information on your placemat, it shows is that we had $750,000 down for land acquisition. And so this is $320,000. We realize that there's some site prep work that needs to be done, but that's a favorable development relative to it. In our current facility, we're in a rental facility that we're doing year to year. And so approval of this by us and approval by the full board, because it's subject to the full board that meets next week, will allow us to get started on this particular project. So I'm going to ask all those.
Just real quickly, what was the date again? October?
I said Friday, October 14th.
Let me-
I think that's a Friday.
I've got October 14th as a Thursday, so either the 8th or the 15th.
Let's go the 15th.
Okay.
Give them Friday. So friends, I'm off one day, every day.
That's a
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. You were about to call the vote.
Okay. So all those in favor say aye.
I
Aye.
Aye. Michelle?
Aye. Sorry, I was
Okay.
unmuting.
That's all right. Okay. Let it be known that it was a unanimous vote. Thanks. We did this in closed session, so this will be known and we will share this actually with the city in a timely manner and hope that they act in a timely fashion. So I appreciate all the work that went into this because we spent months looking for an appropriate property in Green Valley, and it proved a little bit more complicated than we had anticipated. Next item of business, we're down to number 5, construction update.
Yeah, let me just I want to run through this quick so we can get to our next topic, but construction has carried on. In terms of the placemat, we are still, I want to update this a little bit and sort of refine this, but generally, I mean, the big takeaway, we're still on budget. we're still doing fine in terms of where we are with our overall project budgets. And probably one of the most important things, which we should have actually changed for this, is that, well, no, actually, we don't change this anymore because we used to have decision items and that. But Grain Valley, which if you look at the projects over there, we've got the black column that turns to the green column, then to the white. Grain Valley is starting to move to green. North Oak is starting to move to green, and there are lots and lots of conversations around East Independence. So almost that entire column is moving. It's moving in a very, very positive way or complete. I'd like to show you some images that we have of construction. So if we go to the next slide, please. We'll do what's the status real quick, sorry. So let's go through that, please. Next slide. And so in August, we had our rededication of Blue Springs North, and we also started in earnest at Lee Summit and the punch list at the Woodneath Homestead. And so if we go to the next slide, please. This month in September, we finally had the official paperwork document signing ceremony for Green Hills. And so that's done. Done. We own that property. We actually were also able to get a little bit of additional money from the seller to help us with moving costs if there are any sort of issues that come up around moving. So that was a positive thing. And we've got the North Oak project out for bid for GMP, and that happened September 14th. The Woodneath Homestead, this is the big news here, certificate of occupancy was given on September the 8th, and that's a full CO. So we can start moving in, we can start operating, we could even start having programming there if we so desired. We're not quite ready, but theoretically we could do that. And so next slide, please. So coming up next month, Blue Ridge substantial completion, believe it or not. Blue Ridge we're getting ready to turn the corner there. J.E. Dunn has not let much dust settle on them when we give them the green light. So substantial completion, October 1st, 2021. I think we have pictures next. And so this is Woodneath. This is the Woodneath Auditorium. And so you can see starting in the upper right-hand corner, masonry work is going on the other sides of the building. You can see the glass down below that. That's the monumental stair that's sort of between the two buildings. And so that's sort of the north side of the Woodneath Auditorium. Inside, it looks like a lot of chaos, but I mean, you can see rocks up. It finishes. We're starting to get to that point where we're going to start moving to finishes pretty soon at the Woodneath Auditorium. So on target to be completed this winter. Next slide, please. This is Blue Ridge, and as we said, Blue Ridge is coming close to substantial completion, and you can see that that's the case. We've got the restroom fixtures are in place, a lot of the grading and sidewalk is in place. Carpet's not down, obviously, but the ceiling's in place. Display cases are up. So yeah, we are much closer to finished than starting at Blue Ridge.
It's a huge improvement.
Yes. Jake just sends me a message saying carpet was this week. So yeah, if we actually, the next time we have pictures for this, which will probably be right before board meeting, there'll be carpet. And so next slide is Green Hills, which Green Hills is still at that stage where it doesn't look like a whole lot, but there is a whole lot that's going on. So we've got the grading. You can see the pad is down with the utility, the underpad utilities are coming in. And so this is moving along very quickly. We are still on target for Green Hills, which is about a year after groundbreaking. So spring of next year is probably going to be the move in for Green Hills. Nothing's really slowing us down there. Jake says July. He doesn't like it when I squeeze him by a season. And let's see, the next slide. I think we've got one more set of images. Yes, we do. So this is Lee Summit. And I actually drove by Lee Summit on Friday night, and they are not wasting any time. So obviously you can see everything has been cleared out of the inside. We've got the partition wall up, which is going to allow us to do the glass along the north and the east side, and the parking lot regrading. And certainly that's what you see when you go out and visit, is that there are big construction fences all the way around because we're taking out the parking lot and regrading everything there. So yeah, that is Lee Summit. So I think that is the update. Jake, I rushed through this pretty quickly, but I'm sure you might have something to add. Certainly want to give you that opportunity.
Yes, well, I think you covered it pretty well. I really want to emphasize about Lee Summit. Wow, they are just busting it up. It's pretty cool when you go by there. It doesn't even hardly look like the same building. Blue Ridge, I'm super excited about. The parking lot looks fantastic. The new fence going around. It's going to be an awesome opening when we get ready for it. And of course, the Green Hills, like you said, even though it doesn't look like they're doing much here, I'm expecting some pad pouring and structural steel within the next couple months. So yeah, super excited about that as well. I appreciate the opportunity to at least chime in, but Steve, you did an awesome job as it were with the pictures. So, and yeah, I think we're going to get more current pictures for the board meeting.
Thank you, Jake.
I appreciate it. I know these pictures were August 24th, so, we've had 3 more weeks of activity. So, hey, John Laney, I know you need to be leaving at 9:30. I wanted to check in and see if there was anything that you wanted to share or have us be aware of or take up in your absence.
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, in my motion, I made the motion as though we were approving the Grain Valley issue, and that motion should read, of course, that we're recommending its approval to the board.
Right.
So,
Okay.
sure.
We got it.
It does.
Yeah, I intended to do that, but it didn't quite quite. Secondly, a couple of comments about the progress. I'm absolutely flabbergasted at Lee Summit. It's just amazing. There were people asking me about when that was going to get started, and I told them it would be a certain date that I had been told that it would start, and it did start then. And but the progress has been nothing short of amazing. I think they put a lot into getting that project going, and it's badly needed. So I'm glad to see that. So congratulations on that. A couple of things about Woodneath. One is I had occasion to stop by there on a trip to the airport, and we decided to come back through and take a look at the site. Excuse me. And I frankly was appalled at the condition of the site at Woodneath, and I hope that, and I've expressed those to Steve, and I hope that the conditions that I saw can be taken care of soon. There were large piles of construction debris at different places during the site. Those of you who know my penchant for good landscaping, there was not much good landscaping in evidence. Of some of the problems we've had there in the past, and those seem to be getting worse again. And also, my favorite topic, weeds were everywhere and consuming the little bit of landscaping that was there. And I know that the progress is going on with the auditorium, and that's causing some construction mess, but it doesn't explain the construction mess over the site as a whole. So Steve is committed to me that will be taken care of. And then secondly, on the site, on the question of Woodneath itself and the house, and that is the Story Center now, officially, since it has its occupancy permit. I think it's really important that we plan a dedication of that at the earliest possible date. A lot of effort has been put in by Diana and others on fundraising. and it's been successful. But we need to thank those that raised that contributed funds, as well as make an official start to the Story Center by a dedication ceremony. And I know that it would probably be more convenient to wait until we could jointly dedicate the auditorium and the Story Center itself. But I think we need to do it separately because I believe that we need to get going on the occupancy and also the thank you for the people that have supported us and made this possible. So I'm hoping that those things can be scheduled. So I appreciate the opportunity to make those comments, and I will have to move on though now. I'm sorry, but I had a dentist appointment already arranged a long time ago, so I need to move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Has Michael joined us? Do we know?
Cody would be able to tell us, but or pipe up, but I presume not.
No, it's
Okay.
not yet.
All right.
I can stay more if it's necessary for the meeting.
No, it's a discussion item, John, and you're free to stay as long as you want, but we're going to move on to the next topic, which is a Riverside Reset. And so I'm going to frame this by sort of saying is that our staff have put a lot of time and effort into thinking about Riverside. Michael Lazio, building co-chair, and I had a meeting with some of our staff in August at Riverside to kind of talk through. We felt that there was a significant need to kind of talk and have a reset really around Riverside, partly because for a couple of reasons. The idea keeps changing really over time. And honestly is that we have many new board members who have not been involved in the Riverside discussion at all. And so staff will share this with you during the presentation, but we've been in a 7-year conversation actually with the city of Riverside, really around various sets of ideas. And there's a strong feeling is that we need they're deserving of some sort of response from us. And so that's why we wanted to really reset and sort of come to the conversation with fresh eyes and new understandings, but also be mindful of prior conversations. So I'm going to turn it over to staff.
Michael's on the line also.
Okay.
Oh, and Michael's joined us now. Okay.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Michael. So what, I think Brent did a really nice job of teeing this up and kind of talking about this. And actually, I also want to reflect something that Ron has shared with me, which is we do have, particularly if you go back 7 years ago, when we first started this conversation, we have some considerable turnover on the library board. And so the whole idea, every so often pausing and talking about how did we get here, talking about the history of why we are at a certain decision point is something that's important, particularly in a project that has been as long as this particular project. So I want to thank Ron for sort of reinforcing that idea, which I think is a good one.
7 years. That's why I feel like it has been forever.
Yes, because it's been, well, and we've put a pin in the calendar at 7 years, but as Jim will attest, I actually suggest this might actually go back 3 or 4 years even before that. I mean, if we really want to go, but we're saying 7 years is where it really is. And then we'll lay that out in just a second. The other thing that I've asked is while I was working on Grain Valley and while I was working on a few other issues, I asked, and when we took Riverside out of work package 11 so that we could scrutinize this more, I asked Jake to jump in and really start doing that sort of work. And I asked Jim to be working with the city of Riverside to continue to field their conversation, their proposals, conversations, and all of that. So at this particular point in time, Jim and Jake are actually much more familiar with this material than I am. So what I would like to do is turn this over to Jim and Jake to bring us up to give us the history lesson, but then to also bring us up to speed with where we are. So Jim, you're here in the room.
And I think presentation is that, I think,
Jim, let me switch screens real quick. I'm sorry.
okay, yeah, no problem. I think actually the way that we've kind of got the presentation put together, I think Jake's actually going to go first.
That's true.
Because during the process, when Steve had asked Jake to kind of go back in and really look at everything, you'll see it, but we were working with that old capital plan number from however many years ago.
2014.
That was the $750,000. And we realized that scope wasn't really the scope that we're doing things in our buildings at now in the capital plan. So what does the scope of the building really look like? And that's the work that Jake's been doing. And so when Cody gets this up here, I think we need to throw it over to Jake because he's the one who understands the scope issues.
Ready once it comes up. Thanks for the intro, Jim.
Sorry, just one more second. Thank you for your patience here. You should be seeing it now.
Yeah, we're seeing it on the preview.
Yep. All right, so if you could go to the next page, Jim's kind of introduced that, Steve's kind of introduced that. So this is the page out of our original book as we're going forward. You can see it's a type 2 renovation. Lots of busy work there. But I want to go to the next page, which basically shows the same kind of concept of the scope of work, but it's got it broken out with numbers to it. So you can see that originally it was about 741. Next page, please, Cody. Nope. Page up. I'm sorry. Excellent. No.
Yeah, the one in between. one more click.
Oh.
Yeah, wrong direction. There you go. Stop.
There you go. All right. So basically, the scope notes are real similar to what you'd seen before. You're looking at replacing ceiling tiles, a lot of interior work, light fixtures, revisions, new sliders, extend the canopy, new area. But unfortunately, as we've learned with a lot of our previous projects, the cost is not exactly the same because the scope was different than what we initially thought it was going to be, and we of course learned that as the program has gone on. So you can see that when we put everything together and we got the estimate together and brought it to the year, it's about $1.5 million for all the issues and forth, which translates pretty well to several of our other buildings. I mean, we had some increase on the budgets as we went, if you remember, in work package 7, work package 11, and even in work package 6 and 2. But it wasn't obviously quite as large or a budget as we looked at it because we were early on in the program. The thing that really kind of increases our scope on this is the site work, because when we looked at that parking lot similar to Blue Ridge and Lee Summit and a couple of our other areas, it needs work. It's not within ADA compliance. There's a lot of issues with the entrance, the steepness of the entrance. Don't know how much we can fix on that, but there are some things with that. And then along, of course, you remember a couple months ago, I think it was less than 6 months ago, the branch flooded. We ended up having to close down for a day or so to dry it out. And so we really wanted to make sure that if we were going to push forward with that, we got to, that needs to be fixed, because we don't want to have people out there pushing water out of it and going forward with it. So from a scope viewpoint change, that's what we're looking at, and that's where the dollars are. So if you go to the next slide, it kind of goes over what we're looking at, what the building is. You can see the picture of the facade up front. We're going to demo the left and right, similar to some of our other things, and make it make it look like, all the, most of the other remodels so that it comes into our capital building plan. And then if you look on the interior, now, we're not going to put those two collaboration rooms right in the center. They just kind of put those there as a placeholder, but there's that. And then in the upper right, it's not very well illustrated, but that's where there's going to be a community room. Of course, we're going to do a lot of other things to make it nice as we're going forward. The next slide kind of illustrates what we were going to do for the exterior, and I kind of want to walk this through as you're looking at it. You can see that it's kind of color coded, and up at the very top, you can see that there's orange, and that basically is what we're going to do to mitigate the water issues. We're going to try to. Our concept is to reconstruct curb on the neighboring property, the offsite drainage away from the existing building, because what happens is the neighboring property up to the north and to the east there, as you're looking at this, the water just flows off of the concrete right into us. And so because we're building this, if you recall where the building is, it's built up kind of against into the land. And so in order to mitigate that, we want to do that and add some landscape drains and regrade the swale and again, that'll help get the water away from the building as we're going forward. Then as you go down just a little bit in that particular one, you look, there's some blue with the roof and everything. And there's a purple line kind of around the building. What that is we're looking to reconstruct the roof drain, and we're looking to construct some landscape drains with pipe to drain the landscape out. So basically, again, so that the water doesn't just sit around the building like it's doing right now. It can go out and go forward. And then if you look at you can see the green space there right up next to the building. That's where we're looking to relocate some ADA area to a flatter part of the parking, and then also revise the sidewalk in that area for ADA requirements, including we need to put a ramp in. A little bit to the right of that, you'll see a purple box. That's our dumpster enclosure. We need to make it a little bit larger, and of course, it's in pretty bad shape. So we're definitely going to, again, just like all of our other sites, we're going to make it look better and a little more secure. Then if you go down a little bit more, you'll see kind of for lack of a better word, kind of a jagged pink line. That is a construction of an ADA sidewalk that does not exist right now, but we're going to need to do that if we want to make this ADA compliant from the public. It basically goes from the public sidewalk that runs in front of the building up to the building itself. Again, that's another thing we've done on several of our sites, made those sidewalks, whether they be from either a bus area or whether they be from a sidewalk or whatever, just to make our buildings more ADA compliant. And then the last, at the very bottom, you'll see some red boxes and some red areas, and those are really we're going to do. There's basically what it says for the drive is there's really not a lot of opportunities, as I kind of mentioned earlier, to improve the slope on the existing drive, but and there's also there's some details that there really isn't any probability of adding additional entrances, so we're pretty much stuck with that one entrance. So that kind of gives a detail there. I'm going to stop. I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a breath. Do we have any questions?
I would like to add just a little something in terms of what I challenged Jake to do. So when we took this out of work package 11, sort of created the work package 15 at the end, the idea was not only to give the city of Riverside time to get their ducks in a row, but also to give us an opportunity to take a look at what is our total cost of ownership over a long period of time. If we're going to close this building, shouldn't we try to do as much maintenance as possible, like over like a 10-year window or more? And when we really started digging, that's when we started seeing some of the increase in scope. I have no other way to say this. I mean, we could throw lipstick on this building and it would look okay, but we wouldn't be fixing the grading issue, the ADA issues, the restroom issues, the water issues, and the other things that have become a lot more apparent as we've been having the chance to scrutinize. And that's where a lot of this is coming from. That, as well as equity, just making sure that this building, in terms of finishes and effort, is in line with all the rest of our buildings. So
I want to add to that. My concern with this building, besides the water issue backing up to the dirt in the back there, but the grading of the parking lot that can't be improved, that's a hazard. I mean, anybody loses hands on a stroller, it will ride right into a major street. And I think that is a major concern that I have, stroller, or wheelchair, whatever. That the grading on the parking lot is just a huge issue, as we see, it really can't be improved.
Well, okay, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim. I am available at any time if you would like to discuss this further. Thank you so much for your time.
Question from Ron.
Jake, I don't mean this as an unfair question, but I admit that it is. How confident do you feel that the efforts to the north side where the water, it's just a deluge, how confident do you actually feel that that's something that can be addressed successfully?
Well, that is a really good question, Ron, and I appreciate you bringing it up. So, you know, I've always been pretty straightforward with everyone here, and I want to be straightforward as this. I'm not confident that what we're planning on doing will 100% cause the building not to have any water in it because of where it's located. It's, you know, if you go out there and you actually walk around the building on the neighboring property, you can see why we have so much water coming in, because we being the Riverside branch, get all the water from the church and all the water from the laundry. I mean, some of their drains are down to where we are. So it's going to be very hard to mitigate that, but that's what we would have to do to at least try to mitigate it. But no, I'm not 100% confident that it's going to do and keep the building dry. And
yeah, again, I'm not an engineer, far from it, but I was just thinking, other than the ridiculous of buying the adjacent property, is there any way of having any confidence level? Anyway, and another thing too, I just, maybe, again, this is not your area, but with the attraction of having a new facility there or remodeled and much more attractive, is there a concern over the fact that when you exit, you're almost forced to make a right-hand turn to the west? And it's also a very congested area too, with, you know, the monster-sized Quick Trip and a pretty popular restaurant. Is that an issue? Would we?
yeah, if you don't mind, Jake, I'll address that one. Yeah, yes, Ron, and some of that has to do with the fact that, as Jim will point out, we are now suggesting that this building is not ideally situated or ideally suited.
Yeah.
Now, part of that, again, is because of the history. If we go back in a time machine 20 years ago, and what we discover is there wasn't the humongous Quick Trip that you're talking. In fact, the Quick Trip was directly behind us. There was it was on a totally different corner. The buildings to the north of us were not. Were much more active, and because they were much more active, they were much better at managing their water control. The entire thing is, because the environment around us has changed, it's exacerbated the issues that you're talking about. It wasn't as much of an issue when we moved in. It's become an issue now.
Thank you.
So I think, Cody, if you want to go on now. The one other thing I would say is the other issue is the parking lot itself, the drive lane. It actually wasn't as bad when we moved in either. What happened is that Vivian Road was widened.
Yeah.
And when it was widened, our driveway, the slope necessarily, shortened. And so that's an issue. Okay, so kind of the way this all was introduced was kind of this 7-year process with the city of Riverside. So that's the part I'm talking about. And so, we're calling it, the Riverside Alternative. So it's obviously the alternative to staying where we are. This has been a 7-year conversation. Cody, if you could go to the next slide. So here's sort of the history. As Steve mentioned, there was actually, a couple of conversations even prior to this. But in 2014, I don't think there's any other way to say it, but the city showed up unsolicited and made an overture that was shocking, I think, to the board, to say the least. The building you see up in the corner is what they proposed. They wanted us to put that addition, that big open book, onto our current library. And the board declined. I think staff recommended that the board decline as well, because there wasn't a funding mechanism. There were a lot of issues with that particular issue. So as we go on in time, and so we had said no thank you. 2016, of course, Proposition L comes along, and we had community meetings. We learned some things from those. Residents of Riverside, talked about what they wanted in a library. We tried to incorporate some of that into the capital plan as we went, but definitely heard from some passionate folks. 2018, the city of Riverside reapproached us. We already had, our capital plan in place. They reapproached us about the idea of a shared space on a property the property that we're going to be talking about. But their original idea was sort of this condominium where we would be in with other tenants. We brought that, staff looked at it. We said, okay, well, we'll bring it to, the building committee. Building committee considered it. There were obvious concerns about living in the space with other folks, just about how complicated those partnerships could be, about safety, a lot of those different things. And we had some more conversation with the city of Riverside and learned that sort of one of their concerns and one of the reasons why they were pushing us towards some of these things in particular was because they weren't certain yet of the quality of things we were doing. So at the very beginning of 2020, I skipped the step where they did, however, come and present, and the building committee said, okay, look, we will move this to the end of the capital plan, continue to have discussions. And as long as we can keep these discussions open, we'll consider it. In 2020, we invited the city of Riverside down. This was like one of the last things we did, actually, before we weren't doing things for a while. But we invited the city down to see the East Lee Summit Branch, to see what it was we were doing in our new program. And right after that, the city said, you know what? I think our new proposal is we just give you the piece of property and you guys build a library, whatever you want on it, because we're amazed by what it is you guys are doing now. They were shocked by the difference between an East Lee Summit branch and what they saw in their local branch. And they said, okay, so here's our new offer for you all. And that offer came kind of in May of 2020, but of course, things sort of kept moving. We negotiated back and forth a little bit, and we got to, I can't move it. Cody, could you move we got to this offer, which is probably hard to see. So what we're looking at for a new branch proposal, we're looking at a 14,000 square foot branch. That's about the same size as the Red Bridge branch, which we've determined is a size in which we can do our entire program that we're looking at for new libraries. It would cost $4.8 million. The land would be $650,000 for a total project cost of just under $5.5 million. The city's proposal as part of this is to give us the piece of property, so that's $650,000. For the city to purchase the current library site, that's $1 million. And then the city to additionally contribute $350,000 to the project, which brings down the cost of the project to the library to $3.45 million. So in a way, you look at it, you can say the city's contributing 2 million, but really I think the best way to think about it is the city's contributing 1 million and then we're trading an asset with them, is the other piece. So the bottom line when you get there is that the new project would cost about $3.5 million. Cody, can you do the next one? The location for this proposed project, you can see there's a little arrow flying there. The arrow goes from our old location over to the proposed new location. It's actually kind of right behind where the second Quick Trip was, or I guess it is kind of right where the second Quick Trip was. The Quick Trip, has now been on 3 of the 4 corners there. So I don't know if when Corner Cafe moves away, I suppose they can get the front. But so we'd be right there in this new facility on that corner there. One of the things, Steve will talk about this a little bit, I think, kind of at the end. But that particular location is across Vivian. It's across Gateway on Vivian, which that side of Vivian is a little less busy than the other side. It's across from the community center, and it is just above a park. So it also is connected to the trail system. So those are some things about the location that are appealing. It also does offer the possibility of 2 entrance points in and out of the parking lot. 2 things about the site that are important. We did do the research. It is outside of the floodplain. It is outside of the 500-year floodplain. In fact, if everybody knows where the bank is, the bank's kind of down there, almost at the point of that yellow box down there below. And the bank would have to be almost entirely underwater before this site would get water in it. There's some confidence there. There's a little bit of requirement on the site. How we would have to organize the building, where we would place it, because there is
The utility easement.
It's a utility easement. I'm not sure what. The
Gas.
It's a gas easement that runs underneath, but as long as it just goes under the parking lot, that's perfectly fine. So that's the location. Cody, could you hit the next one? Okay, so what we wanted to do then is compare it, and so I don't want to say, Steve will go back and talk a little bit more about the difference between the 2 projects and which one staff are recommending, but I'm just giving some information. So we look at the cost comparison over the next 10 years. You all saw when Jake was talking, the building remodel as it would be reconstituted now would be about $1.5 million. The site work is about $500,000. Then there was, what we wanted to look at was over 10 years, what would these projects really cost the library? There's 10-year capital cost. That's actually a new roof, because we're not addressing the roof at this point in the program, and also new carpet, because it wouldn't be scheduled. The carpet's relatively new in the Riverside branch. So it wouldn't make sense to replace it now, but it would need to be replaced in the next 10 years. And then there's just sort of, just a very small amount there, about $35,000. There's just the difference that we've experienced operating old buildings versus new buildings in terms of utilities and everything else. So that brings the 10-year total actually up to just under $2.5 million. And then you can see the new branch proposal. This is basically a shortened version of what we showed a minute ago. The new branch would be just under $5.5 million. You put in the city contributions and then the land purchase. And so we're talking about $3.4 million, almost $3.5 million for the 10-year total. We thought this was important for the board to be able to consider what the real cost difference is between the 2 projects. So that brings the cost comparison down to about, it would cost us just under $1 million, about $988,000, we think, more to move to the new branch than it would to stay in the old branch, if the board was to elect to do all the work that we are recommending that we do if we stay in the old branch. This might be a good place to pause. Any questions here?
Ron?
If I remember correctly, which is, wasn't there some conversation maybe 4 or 5 months ago that there was something almost akin to a reserve fund of about 700,000, something like that set aside? And also the savings that we're having from the guaranteed contracts that could be applied?
Yeah, I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think the reserve fund that you're talking about is the amount that is budgeted in the capital plan for Riverside, which is about 750.
Okay, that's for the numbers, yeah, okay.
Right, and
Yeah, actually, the next slide talks
Oh,
about
okay.
the ability to pay for these things. So
Yeah,
let's
okay.
sort of stop there and make sure the comparison made sense to everybody.
Sure.
So
Because I think it is important to remember that Riverside was kind of shelved. That the money that was allocated was, what, 2014?
2014, 2015 is
Yeah.
when we made the,
And we hadn't started our real push for the capital plan in the scope that it is. So when we look at that original amount, we really can't say that the cost has increased for the scope that we're doing. We really have rethought Riverside altogether.
right.
I'm kind of familiar with that branch. That's where I pay my late fees. And it's, the poor thing needs help.
Well, and time does march on. I mean, so the other thing, Riverside and Smithville both have a similar situation where both of those branches, and actually North Independence to a certain degree, those three branches both had some significant investment around 2010, 2011, 2012. And so when we did our capital plan, relative to the rest of our building stock, those buildings actually looked pretty good. And so we didn't put as much assets into those buildings. As we've been working on the buildings, as we've learned what we needed to learn, as J.E. Dunn has pointed out stuff that we could be doing and should be doing, the scope changed. And that was really the thrust of Jake's conversation. There probably should be a third group of numbers here. And essentially it's just, it's like I said before, just, slapping lipstick on the building. And if we slap lipstick on the building, that's $750,000, certainly a much lower number than any of these, but we have not addressed any of the issues. I mean, we're going to have staff in there dealing with flood issues. We are going to have to replace the carpet. We're going to have to replace the roof. And so really, the set of numbers on the top is, I believe, a legitimate sort of total cost of ownership over the next 10 years.
I want to check and see if there's any question from board members who are online, Michelle or Michael.
Yeah, I don't have, I guess necessarily any questions as much as I'm a little happier with this than I've been in the past because I have just felt like Riverside is I'm going to say my mouth was open when Jim said they didn't like the quality of what we do. That kind of is the general feeling that I've had with them. Just because they've wanted, they just have needed to sweeten the pot a little bit more. I mean, I feel like this is better. Not 100% thrilled with it, but I feel like this is a lot better and is a better route to go, I guess, than staying in our location. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. It does to me.
Yeah, we paused here. I think there's some question about the financing, and so
That's coming.
that's coming, but I want to see if there's any questions about the cost side of it all before we move to the financing side, so.
Okay. So Cody, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so we looked at, could we fund either of these? Because obviously even the first version is considerably more than what we were talking about in the capital plan. And I think the best way, one thing I wanted to point out was when we go back to that, when we're talking about the stay version, the 1.5 million is sort of the comparable cost to some of the other branches. So we've actually seen the scope in the renovated branches move up a little bit. And I think we've all seen like sort of the history of this whole capital campaign, right, or capital plan has been that the renovations have cost a little bit more than we originally thought, and the new buildings actually have cost a little bit less than we originally thought. And so that's kind of how things have been moving. So this change in cost is really pretty similar. What makes Riverside a little bit unique is the other 500,000 that has to do with all the site work and everything else that we need to do that's really unique to Riverside. And so that's where you get up to that higher number of 2 million. And so I think, so I just think that's important to consider moving forward. But it does mean that either way, you know, we're looking at a considerable difference in what we have budgeted versus what we're looking at. So I think one of the things that Steve wants to recommend ultimately to the board in either case is to actually remove, and if you want to hop in here, you can, but he wants the board to consider removing Riverside from the capital plan and making it a separate project in either case here, just because of where we're at with the scope and everything else.
And as I recall, that was a conversation early on that we had thought about whether or not to leave Riverside in the existing capital plan. So this was a revisit of that idea.
Right. And so either one of those, either one of these scenarios that we're talking about, if it was removed from the capital plan, probably either of these funding streams would be possible for the board to consider. And so there are two here. So funding stream number one basically brings the whole thing straight out of the capital fund as it stands today. The capital plan budget for Riverside. So essentially the board could remove that 750,000 that was budgeted from the capital plan budget, I mean, move it out, you know, but bring it out along with the Riverside project. There are currently, according to Quan said between $2 and $3 million currently, actually in the capital fund, in excess of what is required to be able to finish the current capital plan. So that's money, of course, that's, you know, we've continued to put in there because obviously we don't want the capital plan to end at zero. We don't want the capital fund to be at zero when the capital plan ends because we have things to do. So there's money in excess there now. We also are projected, I don't know if you all remember, I mean, the finance committee looks at this, I think, on a regular basis, but we've got sort of this like long-term 25-year projection of the budget. And in that projection, we're anticipated to have revenues in the capital fund, and those come from budget transfers out of operating, from interest, from some other things, over the next 3 years of an additional 6.3 million. So obviously.
And Jim, if I could interject for just a second, I mean, the purpose for that, again, intentional, this isn't just, you know, we're digging in the backyard and found a bunch of money. I mean, the purpose of this 6.3 and even the 2 million that Jim was talking about before is to slowly build up the capital plan so we can make roof repairs, put new asphalt on the parking lots 10 years from now when that needs to happen. So you put a little bit away over time and then you can do that. And so that's the source of this and planned. It's been planned all along. So.
Right. And so you can see that you add all those together, that's about $9 million sitting there right now, of which we could tap for either of these two projects, either the 3.5 or the 2.5. And so there's that piece. Then, so funding stream number two is a little bit different. It mostly comes just directly out of operating. So you start still with the 750,000 that was budgeted. We believe right now there's going to be.
The auditors are going to report.
The auditors are going to report that there's about $1 million in revenues over expenses, which could be transferred to the capital fund. In this operating version, it's not that we're paying for it out of the operating fund directly. The operating, you know, these would be transfers from the operating fund into the capital fund, and then we pay for it out of the capital fund. But additionally, the operating fund has some additional funds in it. The best way to, I mean, I think finance committee talks about it a lot, but because of the carryover from year to year, we always have some additional, you know, we basically have like half of our funding for a year sitting in the operating fund until we get the tax money. But, you know, over the years, there's been some discussion about what level that needs to be at. It's still sitting up closer to 50%. There's been discussion that it could be down in the lower 40s. To do that, we could actually transfer a couple of million out. What you're talking about then is just cash flow and, you know, whether or not we're comfortable with our particular cash flow at that period. So you do that, you know, obviously that's 3 million plus the 750,000. That gets us to the place where we could do either of the two projects. Obviously, you know, the board could make all these decisions, but, you know, it's obvious that funding stream 1 and 2 aren't totally unique to each other. Like, you do a combination of the two. It's basically the slide was to point out that the money is available. It is available in a couple of different ways, and in a couple of different pots. There's a little asterisk at the bottom, which just points out that the Riverside itself actually has 2 TIFs expiring. One has expired, and that's the Argosy Casino TIF. And another one expires in a few years, and that's the Horizons Project TIF. And together, those will mean about $300,000 a year in new revenue from the city of Riverside. So in terms of helping replenish some of the funds that we would be taking out to do either of these projects, those funds are, you know, that's actually a positive in terms of replenishing those funds. So I think that's the end of what I was going to talk about. Steve's going to take over and talk about then where staff have gotten to and what we would recommend. You probably already can figure it out. But any questions about the funding piece of it before
I should point out, we do need to really sharpen the pencil even a little bit more and do a little bit more work on this. But the big question is, or the big charge to us has always been, can we show where there might be revenue to do these projects? And I think the answer is clearly yes. So, but we need to do a little bit more work on this.
Okay. Steve, I think it's back to you.
Okay, so in terms of and probably just one more thing on the on the revenues. I'm always, as probably you all are always kind of cautious about the idea of taking your home improvement fund and then spending it for something else. And in a way, that's kind of what option 1 is, where we're saying take our home improvement fund and spend it for something else. But a couple of things to keep in mind with option 1 or option 2 for that matter, is that all of our buildings are new. There's very, very, very little maintenance that's going to need to occur over the next couple of years. So if we were to tap our home improvement fund, if you will, right now, staff feels very confident that we will be able to build that back up with revenues over expenses, with new construction, with things like TIFs coming off the rolls, all of those sorts of things. We'll be able to build it back up so that we are not in a situation where we have a deferred maintenance situation in 10 years' time. So just wanted to really underscore that. If I felt like we weren't able to maintain our buildings, we wouldn't be making that recommendation. So to staff recommendation. I really feel like the question as to whether or not we should replace the building at Riverside, I think it's pretty obvious. We should replace the building at Riverside. There's lots of reasons why. It's not ideally situated or positioned on the property anymore. And as we've said here, the building is not ideally suited. In one way, if you approach our building, it feels like the back of the building or the side of the building is facing the property. If actually you approach it from the east on Vivian, it's probably in its most ideal situation, but that's not the way the vast majority of people approach it. And the reason it's that way, as we've talked about, is that everything on that corner was totally different when we built that building. Number one. Number two, we've got the whole issue with the parking lot, like in the driveway, like Jim was saying, and when they widened Vivian, it exacerbated our problem. And so that there's a lot of issues that the building was ideally situated when it was built. The world changed around us, and now it's not. The investment in diverting water, we believe will help and will help a lot. But ultimately, as Jake said, a lot of this is doing things like building curb on other people's property. This is leading a horse to water. I mean, there are people who can say, no, we don't want you to improve our product. It's happened before. And so, there are situations where we may not be able to even the plan that we have that's been endorsed by our engineers may not be able to be done. And so it'd be much better to be able to do this when we're in complete control of our area. And kind of mentioned about the parking lot. I think it's important, you can't discount, even though we're just moving across the street, you cannot discount the fact that that piece of property is much better situated for what we want to do in a 21st century library. If we wanted to have an outdoor story time right now, there really isn't a good place to have an outdoor story time at that Riverside branch, except out in the parking lot, which you really don't want to have story times in the middle of your parking lot. That being adjacent to the park is something that is good. Being adjacent to the city trail program is something that is good. Being right across the street, directly across the street from City Hall and the community center is something that is good. Being in a situation where we can position our building so that it faces the corner and takes advantage of the clock tower and things like that, so it increases visibility, is something that is very, very good. Obviously, with all of our new buildings, we've been building in drive-up windows. We'd be able to build a drive-up window with, and this is when we start getting to some of the bonus stuff, not just proximities, but the fact you can build a drive-up window in the new Riverside. We could not retrofit the existing Riverside building for a drive-up window. The way the land is situated, we're going to be able to have 2 points of egress. Again, this may not sound like a big thing. It's a really big thing for me, because one of the things that ends up happening, if you have street construction on one of the roads, then you're not sealed off. If you need to maintain your parking lot, you can kind of do half and half without having to close your building. If you have 2 points of egress, we don't have that at this particular point. I think we do believe, actually, I don't believe this. I know this. Having just done a north tour last week, when I go into our buildings, as we've redesigned and resituated our buildings, they are easier to manage, but our new construction is even more easy to manage. It's purposely designed building, purposely laid out building. And so even though it's 1,000 square feet smaller than our existing building, but if you were to go and talk to Patrice Nolet, the branch manager, she will tell you that Riverside is hard for her to manage. It's a big cavernous building. It needs more staff than what the volume really dictates. On the other hand, a building like Redbridge, for example, which is a renovation but is designed appropriately, can operate with, roughly the same amount of staff, but do so in a much more efficient and effective way. And part of that is because we're laying out the building to be able to provide the service in the right way. So my feeling is that whether we renovate it or build new, it's going to be a better situation for the people of Riverside. However, if we build new, we're only talking about, what we should spend for the renovation versus what we should spend for a new build is less than $1 million. It's going to be easier to maintain. It's going to give us better proximities. It's going to give us better service opportunities, better opportunities to provide service for the community, making it easier, walkable for people who are, in greater need, people who find themselves in a transportation desert in Riverside. Many folks, including Katina, have told us that people walk from the west side of Gateway, if I've got my orientation correctly. They walk from the west side of Gateway, but won't cross Gateway to get over to us. And that's where where a lot of the Section 8 housing and all of that is. So it puts us in a better position to serve people for the next decade plus. And so from a staff perspective, I realize $900,000 is not nothing, but from our perspective, when we're looking at a capital program where the total budget is in the $113 million range, and we're talking about a $900,000 difference to really have a 21st century library experience with better proximities and better opportunities. Staff feels like this is something that we would like to encourage the committee to think about and chew on and come up with some more questions and consider at our next meeting.
Steve, you've got one more slide too.
Okay.
Cody, can you go to the last one?
Oh, yeah, this is also very important. So one of the things to keep in mind, thank you, Jim, I'd forgotten about this slide. So one of the things to keep in mind is that as an independent political subdivision, we very often just sort of blaze our own trail and do what we want to do because that's how we're situated. But we have had situations in the past where cities have come alongside us and said, we want to help, we want to do something to make things better. One of the first times this happened was the Midwest Genealogy Center. And the City of Independence donated essentially a right-of-way of about 1.5 acres to add on to the property that we were buying for MGC to really make the property workable. What that worked out to be is it worked out to be about, the land donation was worth about $200,000, but the City of Independence donated land in value of $200,000. Woodneath, the City of Independence, actually, there's one more on here that we probably should add, Jim. But the Woodneath Library Center, the City of Kansas City has helped us acquire PIAC funds and actually two TIF projects. They actually helped us build that turn lane that's on Flintlock with TIF funds. And so really that number is probably closer to $830,000. But point is, the City of Kansas City has, sort of bellied up and they've given us $830,000. In terms of Riverside, City of Riverside, and as you can see, as we've talked about in terms of per capita, much smaller than the two other communities that we're talking about. But the City of Riverside is suggesting a donation in combination of land and cash of $1 million, plus an assurance to buy our existing building for another $1 million. As is, we don't have to go in and fix a bunch of stuff in order to sell our building. We don't have to put it on the market. If I can sell a building without the headache of actually having to go through selling the building, and we can get close to, a reasonable price, and $1 million is a reasonable price for that building, then I think that's a really good thing. So what we're talking about is between cash donation, assurances, and such. The small 3,000 person community of Riverside is committing $2 million, which is far and away in excess to the other partnerships that have been proposed to us in the past. So something to keep in mind. I mean, if the question is, well, and certainly those of us who were around 7 years ago, I can't remember, Brent, if this was your characterization. I'm going to say it's Trent's characterization. So we talk about him since he's not here. Is that the fanned open book was Riverside's dream, their dream that they wanted us to pay for. That's not what we're seeing anymore. We're seeing a community that actually listened to us, heard what we had to say, saw what we could do. They didn't know what we could do. They assumed that a new Riverside would look like the old Riverside. When they saw what we could do, they said, okay, yeah, you guys know what you're doing. We'll back off. And they've really stepped up. So it's been a maturation process, and definitely I think they've heard us and responded. I thank you. This has been a longer presentation, but we really did want to take the time to reset the table.
I'm sorry, there's one more.
Provide the history. Well, we kind of already talked, I kind of already talked about this, but that is true. We did put in that next slide. So the whole idea, this is not a decision. Today's not a decision. I mean, certainly open for questions, comments that people might have. But the whole idea is to chew on this, think about this, go out to the site. Visit me out on the site, give me a call, give Jim, give Jake a call. And then what we'll do is bring this back to the committee at an upcoming committee meeting, and then the committee can make a recommendation. Your recommendation can be to not do anything. I mean, that's perfectly fine. But what we'd really like to do is try to get off a dead center on this. We'd like to be able to tell the city of Riverside, are we going to do this? Are we not going to do this? So upcoming committee meeting, recommendation for the full board, and then full board decision.
Michelle, I'm mindful that you said you needed to get off at 10:30, so I wanted to see if there's anything that you might want to say or questions that we need to kind of get answers to.
Well, I really appreciate Jim and Jake putting together everything that they have, and they gave it to us here just a few weeks ago. And personally, I've driven over there and looked at those two sites, just sat in the parking lots, and sometimes you just have to go check it out, just sit there and just see what what the feelings of it are. And I think the comment that was made by Jake and Jim both, and probably by Steve, is that the mayor really professed a desire to have the library in Riverside. They really wanted us there. And that, everyone? Yeah. And so I think that's huge. And so they backed it up basically in their numbers, saying we really want you guys here. And it appears that when they went to see the Lee Summit, that altered the course of their decision making. And I'm really for the moving ahead with what we've been talking about personally. So just looks like we've done our homework, and the main concerns I have, and I talked to Steve about this, is just, can we pay for it? Where's the money coming from, and all that? And I think those questions have been answered today, at least for me personally.
Michelle Wyckoff, are you still there? Okay. I open up for just further discussion, so.
Just a couple of things. I agree with what's been said so far, but in all fairness, our old buildings were set up for maximum locations and distribution before. So I'm not surprised the city wanted something more, wanted to help us think about something more. I'm not particularly offended by that. I'm encouraged by that because they see the value of libraries, and once they saw what we were doing, they're totally on board. I think some things to remember or keep in mind as we think about this is we have a city that's engaged with the library, a city that wants us there, a city that is supportive of the library, and a city that, for all has been in good faith efforts with us, and has come back, I think, with a decent proposal. The other thing is, I think it is important that we serve the taxpayers of that city. We've already made them wait 7 years for a definitive plan. And I think the city and the patrons deserve a decision from us. I think waiting even longer is unacceptable to me. And I think in terms of the location, it's an ideal location for us, and it's an ideal location for the city in terms of their overall plan. I would much rather be part of a successful overall plan than be another governmental agency impeding the plan. That to me is not where the library should be situated. And for all intents and purposes, they could come back and say, okay, eminent domain, we'll just do it anyway. So I think cooperating is a much better position for the library. And I think that's important. I think the new building fits our needs better, and the needs of the community. And I think I think the city has put in a lot of effort into keeping us there and trying to help us reach our dream and their dream.
I have a very simplistic approach to it, and that is, do we like it? And the answer is yes. And then can we reasonably allocate the funds to pay for it? And that's yes. So the two absolute musts are, I think, well accomplished. And another thing, it's just me, but I think that if we can provide a service for areas that are a bit marginalized and in more of a, I wouldn't say desperate need, but an absolute need, I think that's something we should pursue. And that area of Riverside, I think it'd be well served by a library that's attractive and engaging and comfortable for people to come in who maybe before would not be that, might not find the idea of a library to be part of their lives. And I think this is, it does so much good in other areas too. And we can pay for it.
Much has been said. I appreciate the staff's extraordinary work in this. Just some sort of comments. They are not present. I appreciate prior boards who were disciplined enough to sort of say that doesn't work for us. I deeply appreciate the city of Riverside kind of hanging in there. I figure like this has been like we've been dating for a long time, because we have. And when I look at it, actually what Riverside is offering us in terms of its contribution exceeds actually what the city of Independence and Kansas City combined together, did for this. And frankly, I view this as a leverage opportunity. I mean, what would it be like, if I'm looking at $2 million to a $4.8 million cost for a building, that's 40% leverage. I mean, isn't that sound investment? So even though that requires some additional capital on our part, that's a capital that in some senses we don't have to expend because we have a partner in being able to do this. The other thing I was struck by this, particularly if we go to this new location, is that how many of our new libraries have access to trails? I keep hearing that, this one has access to a trail, this one has access to a trail, this one has access to a trail. And frankly, it'd be interesting for us to go through and do an inventory about how many of the Green Valley location would have access to a trail. Riverside would have access to a trail. Woodneath has access to a trail. And this is not something when I ever thought about, building a library plan that the access to trails and outdoor space, particularly if we didn't have to pay a premium for the access space, is kind of an interesting development really around the locations we have picked and the things that we've sort of undertaken. I think that there may be some individual questions. I know Michael and I had some, and we felt that they were, Michael can represent himself, but I felt my questions have been sort of, answered. I think the real challenge is that, as I said at the outset, because this is a new board for the most part, 4, if not 5, I think we're still waiting for another appointment from Platte County. We wanted to be thoughtful about understanding new board members because they have responsibilities in their participation in making this decision, that they understood why they might be for or why they might be against. I do want to correct Steve on one point. I believe we have a commitment to do something in Riverside because that was part of Proposition L. We engaged in a social contract with the voters that said, we're going to improve your library. So we would not say, well, we're not going to do anything because we don't like where we are. So the question is, where are we going to make our investment to serve that library community? I think I would be interested in myself. We talk about the city of Riverside, but understand our libraries serve a broader geography than that. I'd be interested in understanding population growth now that we have the 2020 census, data out about what does that look like. Just in general, is that the growing parts of our library district are the places actually where we're making significant investments. Lee Summit, Platte County, Clay County, but those are big geographies. So where in the counties is this growth sort of occurring? And I think as we think about it, I appreciate the 10-year time frame because in some ways I think that's how we should, particularly on the building projects, that's how we should be approaching these sorts of things. So. Michael, I see you're still there online. Anything you want to say or share?
I guess nothing really other than what I have. I was actually looking at the census things as you were talking. And from 2000, 2010, 2020. And so that's a great little comparison there. There is a sheet for that for Clay, Platte, and Riverside. And so I just think we have a great opportunity, and I agree with you, Brent. We did commit to Riverside, and Um, what Joycelyn said, what you said was really important, just the fact that they want us there. And I think that speaks volumes. And then again, your comparison, Brent, and the sheet Jim and Jake did on their investment in all this, and then comparing it to what Casey and Independence did is huge. I mean, there's not even any comparison. So we could use that down the road with maybe other cities. So that's.
No, well, so two things real quick. I did misspeak, and I didn't mean to say that we would do nothing at Riverside. So thank you for clarifying that. But Michael, you're absolutely right. Again, in terms of just real brief history lesson, it's not unusual for a city to come to us and have their dreams and want us to realize their dreams. And one that comes to mind not too terribly long ago was City of Blue Springs. Blue Springs had a really sort of aggressive idea and wanted us to sort of manage it. And as we sort of backtracked and said, so what are you going to do to help us? Crickets, and so this does begin to set a little bit of a precedent saying this is what we can and should expect. So.
Yeah, as a newer board member, that history that Jim walked through was huge, going all the way back, I think, to 2014. I'm not looking at that page right now, but just the history of what's happened there. Personally, I have a long history with Riverside going all the way back to 1969. And I've watched that city completely transformed from what it once was to what it is now. And it's beautiful, really. And I think we can be a part of that now because we don't have to, as Steve said, we don't have to fulfill their dream. We have a dream. And so.
And to the history comment, that's Ron. Ron was the one who's encouraging us to make sure that we're building that foundation based on where we've been. And so thank you for reminding us to do that.
Yeah, we were at a different place than we were back in early 2010s when we went around and looked at the libraries and
Yes.
we're tripping over carpet and staff was laying carpet and we had 10 years before we could replace needed carpet and we're in a totally different place. And I think it's going to take the public a while to recognize that we are in a totally different place and we just need to keep getting the word out. And I think other opportunities will come along.
Any more discussion on Riverside? I know John Laney had to get off. Yummy wasn't on. We wanted to have another discussion really around Riverside. I think it can be a little bit shorter, but we wanted to kind of get ourselves in the thinking about it all. Actually, it may need to be longer. I mean, it needs to be what it needs to be in order to have other people understand. But we want to get back together, the building committee, to make a formal recommendation. Stay where we are or go to a different location, so that we can take it to the full board and provide a timely and thoughtful response to the city of Riverside. So, any other concluding comments on Riverside?
I'm just wondering if it would, given the makeup of the newness of our board, if it would be nice to have scheduled maybe a tour of the remaining projects for the board. Just a thought.
I am just overwhelmingly convinced that this is something to go ahead with, and also that, aren't we at that point to make a recommendation to the full board right now?
We have a quorum right now.
We do have a quorum.
Are there any loose ends, really? If there are, of course,
procedurally,
Is it a comfort factor?
there's a procedure issue is that we didn't, I mean,
We didn't list it as a decision item on our agenda.
and
Would have
there,
been one.
yeah, and it's really, and it's really not an urgent item that would rise to the level of forcing it to a decision item, so.
And Ron, I think we may actually be meeting in a couple of weeks anyway, because there's a GMP coming, guaranteed maximum price coming in for North Oak. So if we're,
It's not gonna set too long.
It's very exciting.
so if I sense that there's some consensus, then we may be taking this up in just a couple of weeks. And so we're not gonna let this slide into October, I think is the sense. And then I think the other part is we have a board meeting coming up next Tuesday, and then we will have a building committee report, and we will say we'll have this discussion. And I think to Joycelyn's point, we will offer board members a chance to either meet staff there on site or get individual briefings on it. And
Yeah, and then on number 11, the drop dead date, you're gonna have that bumped back.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, we amended the friendly amendment on the LOI, and so that's done, yes.
yeah. So,
On tours though, I mean, as I mentioned, it's like a baton march. I mean, and Michael can attest to this,
It is.
that it takes quite a while to get through all of those branches, but we do it. And we can do half of them at a time. But I go every month. And so if any member of the building committee or any member of the board wants to join me on my tour, let me know. And I mean, we can use the library van. If there's too many people, we can ride in my car if it's just me and one other person, but I go every month.
on that, I think the particular need is if people feel comfortable around the Riverside decisions.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so let's offer a couple of dates that people could meet staff on site at Riverside so that when we go into this, conversation, they feel like that they understand the options and the considerations. Okay. If people are okay, there's other business, any other business that anybody wants to bring up or share?
I think we had nothing. Should mention that, I mean, our other big project that's still out there, East Independence, is still progressing. And I hope to have maybe something a little bit more concrete at our next meeting.
Okay. Michael, anything on your part?
No, other than, I think, did you guys start out by discussing
Yes.
Grain Valley?
Yes, we did. And it was approved, Michael. And if you want to add your vote to that, we could step back and allow you to cast a vote on it if you wanted to.
So approved as in move forward?
Approved as in move forward with one amendment to change the date to Friday, October 15th for the.
Well, move forward by recommending it to the full boards.
Yeah, the full board,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I'd say yes.
Okay, all right, we'll go back and record you as voting yes for that. Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
I thank everybody for the time spent on this today. Two significant things transpired.